Is it cycle syncing or is it just listening to your body? Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah. I am a non-diet dietitian and personal trainer here to help you unpack current wellness trends. And cycle syncing is definitely trending.
If you're a woman and you have a period and you're not cycle syncing, you need to watch this video.
I started cycle syncing. I did not expect it to have an impact on so many aspects of my health.
So should we be exercising and eating differently based on the time of the month? We're gonna answer exactly that in this video. We're gonna go through a quick breakdown of the phases of the menstrual cycle. We'll talk about what cycle syncing is as well as the claimed benefits of it. We're gonna go over how to cycle sync according to the cycle syncing experts. I'm gonna share some of the potential issues with cycle syncing from my perspective as a dietitian. And we're gonna end with some tips on how to cycle sync without it being too restrictive and diety. Before we go any further, I want to remind you that this video is not medical advice. If you are a menstruating person watching this video and you have questions about your cycle, please reach out to your healthcare provider. All right, let's start with a quick breakdown of the menstrual cycle. I feel like we aren't really taught this in school. Honestly, a lot of what I've learned has been in my adult life just through experience and through other professionals. I don't know, I feel like it's barely touched on and we aren't really taught much about how it can look different for every single person, which is going to be a huge theme of today's video. Every single menstruating person's cycle is going to look different. Some have very consistent cycles, others are totally random, and conditions such as PCOS, endometriosis, PMDD, these can all play a really big role in how our cycle ebbs and flows. No pun intended. So as I do this quick breakdown, I want to remind you that your cycle is unique to you. Generally speaking, the average cycle lasts for about 28 days, but it can really vary from anywhere from 21 to 35 days. And the first phase I want to discuss is the one that you are likely most familiar with, and this is menstruation. This typically lasts for about 3 to 7 days, and this is the phase where you are actively bleeding. You might notice that during this phase, energy levels are really low, you're feeling really fatigued, and there are tons of other symptoms that come with being in the menstruation phase. Usually some not so fun ones.
Feels like a fat man sitting on my uterus.
I hear that.
Next is the follicular phase. This is the phase after we're done with our period. This tends to last for about 10 to 14 days or so. During this phase, we are recouping from being on our period. Energy levels start to rise. We feel more creative. You might notice that you feel more motivated during this phase, more excited about things. Usually you're feeling pretty good right about now. Then we go into our ovulatory phase or ovulation. This is the phase where we are fertile and can get pregnant under normal circumstances. You might feel the most social and confident during this phase. If you're pretty introverted like me, this might be the phase that you actually want to go out and be with other people. This phase is pretty short and only lasts for about 1 to 3 days. And again, if you're introverted, you might relate to this, that you feel like you have that desire to be social and be with people for only a few days out of the month. Because after this phase ends, we are going into our luteal phase. The luteal phase is about 10 to 14 days in length and it lasts until we get our period again. And that last week of the luteal phase might be when you start to experience PMS symptoms.
No, woman. No cry.
Energy levels are decreasing, we feel more withdrawn, we're feeling more tired, more fatigued, and then eventually our period starts again and we repeat that cycle over and over again. So because we feel so different during each phase of our cycle in terms of our energy, our creativity, our motivation, there's something becoming more talked about and trendy known as cycle syncing. Basically, cycle syncing is all about tailoring our diet and our movement patterns based on the phase of our cycle that we are in. The cycle syncing experts suggest that by tailoring our diet and exercise habits to our menstrual cycle phases, that we can experience a lot of benefits such as more regular periods, gentler PMS, less mood swings, more effective workouts, just generally having more connection to our body and what it needs, as well as fertility support and knowing the best time to conceive or not conceive. And if you have a regular cycle, this is said to be a pretty simple practice. The cycle syncing experts suggest at minimum just tracking your cycle. There are tons of apps out there to help you do this. And I myself actually just use the health app on my phone to keep track of all this. Some also suggest using a thermometer each day to test your body's temperature. This is because our internal temp changes throughout the different phases of our cycle. And these changes can help you to know if you are ovulating or not. So once you have a pretty good idea of what each phase of your cycle looks like, you can then start to modify your food and nutrition and exercise habits around them. And this is where it gets to be a little wishy-washy. When it comes to modifying our food choices, there are so many different explanations of what foods we should eat versus shouldn't eat during each phase of our cycle. There's also charts like this one that break down each of the different phases and each of the food groups and say which foods you should eat during the phases of your cycle. What it usually comes down to is the nutrient composition of the certain food choices you're making, as our body does do better with different nutrients during the different phases. And as a non-diet dietitian, a really big immediate issue I'm potentially seeing coming out of this is a lot of inflexibility when it comes to your food choices. You might think, okay, I am in my ovulatory phase. This means the only grain that I can eat is quinoa. And while quinoa is quite nutritious and may provide your body with the nutrients that it needs during that phase, that doesn't mean that other foods can't also provide your body with those same nutrients. Honestly, I suggest just feeding your body generally a wide variety of foods, and by doing so, you likely will meet the nutrient needs that your body has. It's okay to eat chickpeas even if you aren't in your luteal phase. You also don't have to eat chickpeas if you are in your luteal phase. I really do like the concept here of listening to your body, tailoring what your body's intake is based on what your body's telling you. But for some people, that can still just be a little bit too restrictive, especially when we do have charts like this that tell us what foods we need to be eating during each phase. I think what's actually more important than following a chart like this is learning how to actually make peace with food, which will eventually allow you to actually tune in better to what your body's needs are. If we are listening to our body, but that just means that we are eating based off of a random chart we found on Pinterest, I wouldn't say that's actually listening to our body. The same concept goes for the exercise portion of cycle syncing. Cycle syncers suggest tailoring your exercise habits to the different phases of your cycle. So during your menstrual phase, when you're feeling pretty low energy, you might try yoga, some light walking, stretching. During your follicular phase, when energy levels start to go up, you might want to do more cardio, things like Zumba. During ovulation, when you're feeling real good, it might be a great time to do things like HIIT workouts. Maybe that is when you would do your heaviest lifts if you're a weightlifter. And then during the luteal phase, as your energy levels start to drop, you might do more relaxing things like yoga, Pilates, stretching once again. And I want to say here that it's okay to rest during any of these phases. If you are in your ovulatory phase, for example, where you feel like you should be at your best, but you actually just aren't having the best day and you don't want to do a workout, that's okay. Listening to your body also includes resting, if that's what your body is telling you, no matter what phase you're in. So in terms of movement, I really do like this idea of doing different types of movement based on what your body is telling you it wants and needs. But once again, we can't let it put us in a box. It's okay to do yoga during all the different phases if you want to. It's okay to lift weights during every phase if you want to. You don't need to follow these guidelines to a T and only do the workouts that are recommended during each phase. Once again, listening to our body does not entail following what someone else is telling us to do. Only you know what your body wants and needs. There's no cycle syncing plan or app or influencer who can tell you what your body actually is going to benefit the most from. So as you've likely already gathered, one of the biggest potential issues I see with cycle syncing is just the way that it can possibly lead to inflexible eating and movement habits. I won't beat a dead horse and keep talking about that, but I just recommend keeping that in mind. Cycle syncing may also be really tough to implement if you have really irregular cycles. People with PCOS, for example, might find that it feels nearly impossible to do this cycle syncing thing, and they might feel like they are broken or doing something wrong because they can't quite figure out what phase they are in. And that's once again where I would say that I encourage just listening to your body and doing what feels good no matter what phase you're in. I think there can be some benefit to know what phase we're in, but it shouldn't be controlling our entire life. And so if you don't always know what phase you're in, that's okay. There is some power in that knowledge, but I don't think we always have to know exactly what our body is doing. The best thing to do is just support your body, nourish it, do movement that feels good, regardless of what phase you might think it's in. Another possible issue I see with cycle syncing is, of course, wellness culture has taken over it. And there are a lot of really big claims being made. Claims that cycle syncing can cure your PMS. It'll completely balance your hormones. It'll get rid of bloating. things like that. But even if you do all this cycle syncing stuff right, you still could have all of those symptoms happening. Because contrary to popular belief, food and exercise aren't actually medicine. I might get hate for saying that, but our health is not fully in our control. We could eat all the right things and have a perfect workout regimen and still have hormone imbalances. So if you have been cycle syncing and you have been kind of following this routine, this structure, and you feel like you do still have such symptoms, try not to blame yourself. Work with a doctor that you trust if you feel like there is an issue going on there. So let's go over my tips on how to cycle sync without it being really diety and restrictive. First and foremost, listen to your body every single day of your cycle. Participate in the type of movement that you feel would be best for your body in that phase, regardless of if it is the right type of movement to be doing in that phase. And again, you also have permission to rest, even if you are in your follicular phase or your ovulatory phase when energy levels usually are at their highest. In terms of nutrition, I recommend focusing on what's known as gentle nutrition. It might help to get more iron-rich foods in during your menstrual phase, but there's no need to feel stressed about getting X grams of iron every single day during this phase. Does that make sense? Again, there is so much power in knowing which phase of your cycle you are in. We just can't allow cycle syncing to be the next diet. So what do you guys think of cycle syncing? I'd love to hear your comments below. And while you're there, make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe so you always know when I'm posting new videos like this one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.